Hello and welcome. You're watching UATV News with me, Ksenia Vuhai. Let's start with the latest developments. The U.S. Secretary of State discussed Russia's actions on the border with Ukraine with NATO Secretary General. This topic became the main in the telephone conversation between Antony Blinken and Jens Stoltenberg. The U.S. Department of State noted, since the negotiations took place shortly before the ministerial meeting of the alliance members in Riga, they also touched upon the issues of the upcoming meeting on November 30th and December 1st. The U.S. administration has expressed serious concern over the concentration of Russian troops near the border with Ukraine. At the same time, Washington noted that the United States is conducting intensive consultations with Kyiv, as well as allies and partners in the region. Ukraine stands for a comprehensive package of actions on countering the aggression of the Russian Federation. It should include political and economic deterrence of the Kremlin, as well as military assistance to Ukraine. This was announced during a briefing by Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba. He stressed that diplomats are working in order to maintain and strengthen international support for Ukraine, primarily in matters of military cooperation and security.
Головна мета – стримати Росію від подальших агресивних дій.
The main task is to prevent Russia's aggressive actions. Moscow must understand what political, economic and human losses it will incur if it initiates a new stage of aggression. The accumulation of Russian troops, intensive aerial reconnaissance, threats to Ukraine from Russian officials at various levels, Russia's deliberate blocking of the Normandy format and the trilateral contact group's work. All this should be considered as components of a single aggressive policy of Russia against Ukraine.
A new coalition has been formed in the German parliament. Olaf Scholz, candidate from the Social Democratic Party, is going to become the new chancellor of Germany. Besides, there is a clause indicating the readiness to support Ukraine's movement towards membership in the European Union in the coalition agreement. In addition, Ukraine's foreign minister Dmytro Kuleba has already called on the new German government to take a tougher stance on Nord Stream 2. Our correspondent, Nick Starkov, will continue.
German Social Democrats, the Greens and Liberals have reached an agreement on coalition in the parliament. The negotiations lasted 2 months. For the first time, the coalition consists of 3 rather than 2 parties. The traffic light alliance, as they call it in the Bundestag, has started working.
Die Ampel steht.
The traffic lights turned on. We are now presenting this agreement to our parties for a vote, and all 3 parties should approve this agreement within the following 10 days. Our task is to lead the state forward under the leadership of a 3-party coalition.
The union appointed Angela Merkel's successor, and the composition of the government. 5 portfolios went to the Greens. Those are Economy and Climate, Foreign Affairs, Family, Ministry of Agriculture and Ministry of Environment. Liberals will head 4 ministries of Finance and Justice, Transport and Education and Science. The Social Democrats will head the Ministries of Defense and Internal Affairs, Housing, Ministry of Labor and Social Policy and Economic Cooperation.
We are having a new government in times of crisis, and I am grateful to Olaf Scholz for promising to do whatever is necessary to break the 4th wave of pandemic.
The document on the coalition agreement has already been made public. It contains more than 100 pages describing the German policy for the next 5 years. In particular, the new government will continue to support Ukraine's movement towards EU and NATO membership.
Ukraine, Moldova and Georgia that seek to join the EU should be able to approach the Union through consistent reforms based on the rule of law and market economies. We will respond resolutely to shocks and partner with democratic movements. We will continue to help Ukraine restore its full territorial integrity and sovereignty. Coalition agreement of the German government.
Если действительно зеленая партия получит
If the Green Party really does get a foreign ministry, then Germany's foreign policy will probably be a little more critical towards Putin's Russia and a little more pro-Ukrainian.
However, there is no mention of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline in the agreement. The Germans also remain neutral with regard to the Normandy format as well. Political expert Andreas Umland believes that the new government will adhere to Angela Merkel's policy on the Ukrainian issue.
I don't expect big changes. We'll see will there be a new approach regarding the Nord Stream 2 or the Normandy format.
The coalition agreement ended the era of Angela Merkel's ruling the day before she spoke for the last time at a meeting of the Cabinet of Ministers as its head. Olaf Scholz is expected to be confirmed in Parliament in a couple of weeks. Reported by Nick Starkov, UATV News.
Iran refused to discuss compensation for the victims of the Ukrainian plane crash. This is stated on the website of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. It goes about downing of the Ukrainian International Airlines plane by the Iranian military in January of 2020. This statement was also supported by representatives of Canada, Sweden and the United Kingdom. The diplomats reminded Iran must fulfill its international legal obligations to pay reparations in full and called on to hold negotiations before the end of the year.
Should Iran continue to avoid negotiating with the group, the coordination group will have no choice but to seriously consider other actions and measures to resolve this matter within the framework of international law. Joint statement from the International Coordination and Response Group for the Victims of Flight PS752 on the website of the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry.
The plane of the International Airlines of Ukraine was shot down by the Iranian military with 2 surface-to-air missiles. All 176 people on board were killed, including 11 Ukrainians. Most of the victims were citizens of Iran and Canada. Hearings in the case of the plane crash in Iran began on November 21st. Joe Biden observed a moment of silence in memory of the victims of the Holodomor Famine and expressed support for Ukraine's sovereignty and integrity. The relevant statement is published on the White House website. The US president noted that millions of Ukrainians who died of starvation were victims of the brutal policies and deliberate actions of Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin. Biden called on for continued work to prevent similar tragedies in the future and to support those who are suffering from tyranny today.
The Ukrainian people overcame the horror of the Holodomor, demonstrating their spirit and resilience and eventually creating a free and democratic society. As we remember the pain and the victims of the Holodomor, the United States also reaffirms our commitment to the people of Ukraine today and our unwavering support of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. Joe Biden, President of the United States of America, from the statement on the website of the White House.
Ukrainian National Airlines, a memorandum of the creation of a national air carrier, was signed by representatives of the Ukrainian government and a French aircraft manufacturer at a forum dedicated to aviation and tourism in Ukraine. The plans of the Ukrainian authorities also include the reconstruction and building of new airports and hubs throughout the country. After that, they will direct their efforts to the development of Ukraine's own aircraft production. 45 domestic enterprises related to this sphere have already been exempted from paying taxes, Prime Minister of Ukraine noted. At the same time, the government is negotiating with Parliament to approve a law on reducing the value-added tax on services provided by carriers from 30% to 7%. In order to reduce prices for domestic tourism, opening the forum, President of Ukraine stressed that all plans for the development of the country's aircraft industry are spelled out in a special program designated until year 2030.
Within the framework of this program, we are taking a new big step we've talked about. In addition to promises, let's move on to practical implementation. This is our national air carrier. Its creation has begun today. We are ready to invest in the air fleet, load Ukrainian manufacturers, and really involve world leaders in joint projects in aircraft construction. This program contains a very important and thoughtful roadmap with elements of the best world experience in the development of aircraft construction. More than $1.2 billion of investments are expected. In fact, 45 enterprises, high-tech aircraft manufacturing enterprises, have received tax incentives till January 1st, 2025, namely exemption from taxation of profits of enterprises, payment of value-added tax, payment of land tax, payment of duties on high-tech equipment.
Command post exercises to protect the state border started in Kyiv region. Law enforcement officers are working out the elements of countering the possible inflow of migrants to the territory of our country. The exercise was attended by police officers, border guards, national guardsmen, migration service officers, rescuers, patrol officers, as well as employees of the State Agency of Ukraine for the Management of the Exclusion Zone. An interdepartmental headquarters has also been created, which coordinates the interaction of all divisions.
Ми продовжуємо нарощувати.
We continue to build up our efforts. Both additional forces of the State Border Service and the forces of the National Guard and the National Police are involved. Support is provided by the State Emergency Service. We know where and which areas need to be additionally strengthened. Since the Ministry of Internal Affairs and all state executive bodies operating under control of the Ministry of Internal Affairs have been repeatedly involved in measures to ensure security, border protection and maintenance of law and order.
Almost 17,000 new cases of COVID-19 were registered in Ukraine over the past day. Almost 3,500 people were admitted to hospitals. Most of the infected are in the Zaporizhia and Lviv regions, as well as in the Kyiv city. Meanwhile, the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine amended the rules for the yellow quarantine zone. Now, entertainment and public institutions will be able to work if all personnel are vaccinated against coronavirus with at least one dose. Same applies to visitors. Ukraine is planning to create a national register of blood donors. This was announced by Minister of Health Viktor Lyashko. He noted that they want to strengthen control over the safety and quality of donor material. The register will contain data on donating blood and donors' medical examinations. In particular, information about the admission of a person to blood donation or prohibition to do so.
Реєстр дозволить в автоматичному режимі.
The register will automatically calculate the number of donations, which will become the basis for assigning the donor the status of an honorary donor of Ukraine. Donors who donated blood free of charge in the amount of 40 single maximum allowable doses or blood plasma in the amount of 60 single maximum allowable doses acquire the status of an honorary donor of Ukraine.
800 offline support points for the DIIA application are already working in Ukraine. Representatives of the Ministry of Digital Transformation went on a tour around Ukrainian cities to check the work of such centers, said head of the Directorate for the Development of Electronic Services of the Ministry, Mstislav Banik. According to him, in such points, Ukrainians will be able to get help in case of difficulties with the DIIA State Services application.
We visit offline support points as they are mostly launched in mass vaccination centers. There's a huge number of people who install the application for the first time and who need a hint, starting with how to enter the Play Market or how to log in. Likewise, people face problems generating COVID certificates.
Books, furniture, curbs and road hatches, all these can be made from a recycled package. The second life is given to milk and juice packaging at a paper factory near the city of Kyiv. Now they are taking raw materials for recycling from all over Ukraine. Our correspondent has more details.
Yulia has been sorting garbage for 2 years now. She started with the simplest things, paper, glass and metal. Later she found out that there is a waste sorting station in the city of Kyiv.
Here are Tetra Pak juice boxes, plastic food wrap, foil and so on. It is great that it could be processed.
Milk and juice packaging consists of paper, polyethylene and foil. In a landfill, it will be decomposing hundreds of years.
It hurts me to look at landfills when you go outside the town. There are many forests near the place I live. It is a disaster what happened to them.
Nowadays, only one sorting station in Kharkiv accepts food packaging. Plasticized cardboard, carton for milk and other drinks. Earlier, such packaging could only be disposed at small recycling centers.
All waste reception points refuse to do it because it is not economically profitable for them to collect it. Therefore, this is the only place.
2 months ago, for the first time in Ukraine, a production for the processing of food packaging and its components was launched near Kyiv. And here they accept every used milk or juice bag. After the packaging gets to the factory, it is washed down to fibers. Then it is being cleared in special containers, pressed and dried.
This packaging is washed out to the condition you can see now, and then on the line it is being turned into granules, and the fiber remaining is used to produce paper.
Oleg has been working at the factory since the start of production. He is responsible for ensuring that the granules are free of impurities. Every month they produce up to 80 tons of raw materials, and it is in great demand.
This can be used to not only make tiles, but also buckets and wash bowls and everything that is made of polyethylene.
Such lines have been operating in Europe for a long time. The Swedes also proposed a joint production. 2 years have been spent for adjustment. At the moment, the main problem is the lack of raw materials.
There are still no full-fledged sorting lines. There are, however, some attempts to separate and collect waste. We suffer a little as there is no full-scale waste collection in Ukraine, because we can process up to 12,000 tons per year. But now we have a deficit of 5,000 tons.
Manufacturers of packaging could supply raw materials, but so far the issue of their responsibility for processing has not been settled in Ukraine. The corresponding bill has already been prepared, but it is not known will the MPs pass it and when will it happen. Reported by Vadim Kramer and Natalia Bilukudria, UATV News.
It has left Florence, Prague and Budapest behind. Kyiv, the Ukrainian capital, is in the top 5 most Instagram cities in the world. The research was carried out by the design bundles company. They analyzed the geolocations of cities and landmarks that are most often mentioned by users on social networks. Kyiv took 4th place with a score of 22 million marks. One of the most popular tourist spots in the Ukrainian capital is the St. Sophia of Kyiv Cathedral. Meanwhile, Rome is the most popular among tourists. It has been tagged more than 60 million times. In total, the compilers of the rating analyzed 145 most popular cities and attractions from the UNESCO World Heritage List.
We are in the top 5 along with Rome and its Colosseum, Trevi Fountain and the Pantheon, with Rio de Janeiro and its Christ the Savior monument, and with Venice and its lagoon. This is a worthy result, and after the big restoration of St. Sophia Cathedral in Kyiv, I'm sure there will be even more tourists and messages about the beauty and history of our remarkable monument. Alexander Tkachenko, Minister of Culture and Information Policy of Ukraine.
That's all for today. More updates on our official website, YouTube, Facebook and Twitter pages. Stay healthy and take care of yourselves.